I'll answer this first question before anyone asks it. What is the fish guy doing here, right? I mean, it doesn't make any sense. I will tell you that 51% of all seafood globally that's consumed comes from farms, fish farms. The future of seafood, by the way, is farming. So that's for another topic. But regardless, so seafood has a lot of challenges, okay? And seafood has a lot of challenges that sort of they bear themselves out in the media. And one of those issues is mercury, okay? Mercury is a neurotoxin, right? And it is in fish. But mercury is a neurotoxin when you look at it in a vacuum, okay? So you have to look at fish completely, and when you do that, you get a different story. So our problem has not been reporting on mercury in seafood. Our problem has been misreporting on mercury in seafood. Okay, and this goes back decades, because if you look at the science now, you look at the World Health Organization or FDA or National Institutes of Health, any mainstream published peer-reviewed science about mercury in seafood says that the benefits of seafood, even with mercury in it, outweigh the risks. Okay, that is the science. That science has been put to bed. This is not an issue that is up for debate. Okay, if you look at, for instance, the U.S. Dietary Guidelines, they very clearly say the benefits of consuming seafood outweigh the risks, even for pregnant women. Okay, that is a pretty definitive statement, right? And pregnant women are, of course, the sensitive subpopulation that nutrition communicators and scientists look at when they're determining whether your product is something that they should, that should be eaten. And the fact of the matter is, the press is almost decades behind in their ability to report accurately on mercury in seafood. And in 2007, NFI decided that this effort that we had up until 2007 in the press was one that was to agree to disagree about some of these issues for fear of getting hammered on other issues. So the idea was, we're just going to agree to disagree on mercury, and we are going to highlight the positives, the positive nutrition benefits of seafood. But by 2007, we realized that agreeing to disagree was the wrong strategy. And it was the wrong strategy because the press was reporting inaccurately about mercury in seafood. It wasn't that this was their opinion, it was that they were wrong. They were wrong about what they were saying about mercury in seafood. So what we decided was we were going to confront them. And if you think about our members, these are member companies that looked at NFI and said, are you sure we want to do that? I mean, isn't this something that's going to anger the press? Isn't this something that's going to alienate us? Is this possibly something that is going to create a worse problem in communicating, because they are going to sort of be more aggressive with us because we're pushing back? But again, this wasn't an issue of their opinion or anyone else's opinion. It was an issue of ground truth science. The ground truth science on mercury is that there are no cases, none, zero, no cases of mercury toxicity, which is mercury poisoning, from the normal consumption of commercial seafood in any published peer-reviewed journal in this country. It doesn't exist. Americans eat about 15 pounds of seafood a year. People in Japan eat about 150 pounds of seafood a year. There's no mercury poisoning in Tokyo, okay? There's no mercury poisoning in Washington, D.C. Normal consumption of commercial seafood does not cause mercury poisoning. Yet the press had been hearing from the activist communities for years and years about this sort of boogeyman, and that's what mercury was or is. So we decided that the way we were going to handle this was we were going to confront the press as soon as we heard that they were working on stories about mercury in seafood. So if the press came to us, if the press came to, for instance, one of our members, if the press came to one of our dietitians, if we heard that the press was working on a story in any way, shape, or form that had to do with mercury in seafood, we would aggressively go after them and say, listen, What you're working on is something that is backed up by published peer-reviewed science that goes back this far and this high, and here's that science. And when we were talking to reporters, we didn't just stop there. We immediately contacted their editors. And then we contacted the editors' editors. We contacted the managing editors. We contacted the publishers sometimes. We contacted the producers. Sometimes we contacted their legal counsel. And we said, we are aware that you are working on this story, and you have to get it right. You have to be accurate in what you're doing. Our strategy was to confront the press when they confronted us or even before they confronted us. And there's a couple of different ways that we did that. One of the ways we did was in the blogosphere. So the first thing we would do if we were contacted by a reporter or if we contacted a reporter, is blog about it. We would talk about it. We would let everyone know someone is working on a story about seafood and mercury. Someone is working on this, and this is what they're saying, and this is the information that we have provided them. So that it's out there, so that it's public. You're working on it, we know you're working on it, and we provided you the following things, and now everyone in your newsroom knows that too. Because sometimes we would target the newsroom. We would reach out to the newsroom and say, your colleague is working on this story, be aware. The editorial chain, be aware. This is what's happening. Someone in your newsroom, someone in your industry even, is working on a story about mercury and seafood, and quite frankly, they better get it right. And if they didn't get it right, sometimes we would take out banner ads on their sites telling them that they didn't get it right. Sometimes we would take out ads in their Twitter streams telling them that they didn't get it right. Sometimes we would contact their ownership group and let them know that they didn't get it right. So this was the strategy that we used in confronting the media specifically on their reporting on mercury. And it was a strategy that was controversial to begin with. But it worked. Now, it doesn't mean that we don't have any bad stories about seafood. It doesn't mean we don't have any bad stories about seafood and mercury. But I can say that if you look prior to 2010, 2007 being the start of this story, we had about a 1-to-1 positive to negative story ratio. For every one good story, there was one bad story. And then in 2010, that story had changed to, that narrative had changed to about 10-to-1 positive to negative. 10-to-1 positive to negative. This number has actually been updated just this past Wednesday. And so leaving 2015 into 2016, that number is now 108-to-1 positive to negative. The seafood industry has a lot of challenges, okay? We have a lot of challenges that are not associated with mercury, that we have to talk about in the press, that we have to explain to the press, that we have to educate people about. But when it comes to mercury, we have successfully been able to turn a corner in the accurate reporting on seafood and mercury. There's never going to be a scenario where there isn't mercury in seafood. But as long as there's accurate reporting on it, we're fine with it. As long as there's science-based, accurate reporting on it, we are okay with that. Now, a positive story for us is a science-based, accurate story. It doesn't mean that it says seafood is the best protein in the world and so on and so forth. As long as they're accurate, then the right story about seafood and mercury will come out. And this has been our strategy, and it's the strategy that we're working on today. If you look at aboutseafood.com, right now, today, on our You Should Know panel, the Chicago Tribune is working on a story about seafood and mercury. It hasn't been published, nothing's been put out, but we're blogging about it this morning. We're saying, this is happening. The Chicago Tribune has a history of getting it wrong on seafood and mercury, and now they're working on a new story. So we're talking about it with them, we're talking about it with their editors, we're talking about it with whomever wants to talk about it, because the real story about seafood and mercury is not a bad one, and we are not afraid of it. And so this is sort of the strategy that I'm happy to talk to you all about.
Today I'm here to talk about a video that DFA dealt with last summer on a farm in Colorado, Cactus Acres, owned by the Goodarts, and how we approached that video in a different way than what we had seen in the industry prior. So it was a Saturday evening, June 26th, last summer, when our field staff, Jill Waite, who works with Marie Goodhart's farm in northern Colorado, got this text message. And basically this text message says, we unknowingly hired a Mercy for Animals representative who worked on our farm and videotaped animal abuse happening and gave it to the Morgan County Sheriff's Office. Another interesting fact that's in this text message is we were already aware of the abuse because we had monitors on our farm that caught it and had already let those employees go long before they knew that Jessica Buck, the employee they hired, was working with Mercy for Animals. So when Jill got this text message, she immediately elevated it within the organization of DFA. And that Saturday night, there were lots of phone calls, lots of emails flying back and forth about how are we going to do this. The industry had been through this before. This was not something new. Mercy for Animals going undercover on dairy farms and releasing the videos. We had a pretty formulaic approach in the industry about how we treated them. We would get the video, we would work with the farm. Once Mercy for Animals released it, we'd issue a statement, we would monitor, and we would see where we needed to step in. It was time for a new approach, and probably 6 months prior to learning about this Cactus Acres video, the industry was coming together and collaborating about how we could be more proactive against animal activists, not just on videos, but an overall strategy. And Monica Massey, who works at DFA as Senior Vice President and Chief of Staff, was a real leader in pushing for this new approach. If we knew about this video, if we have it, why not go out with it first? Why wait for Mercy for Animals to hold this press conference and then us be behind the 8 ball and trying to tell our story? This was a farm who did most things right, who had caught the abuse before they even heard from the Morgan County Sheriff, and we felt like we had a good story to tell. So we collaborated with the industry, National Milk Producers Federation, DMI, IDFA, Leprino, who was the customer that this milk was being shipped to. We all got on the phone and we all decided as a group, if this farm was okay with this strategy, we were going to release this video. We were going to tell the industry story before Mercy for Animals could tell it. And our formula was to own the story and really hit these 4 points. Address the abuse and reinstate our position. We were not going to hide behind the abuse. This did happen on the dairy farm. We were going to own that. We were going to talk about the steps that it takes to fix it. And then another key component of our message was to admonish the extremist group's tactics. We really wanted to highlight that this woman had come on the farm, in some cases helped incite abuse, took this video, and then held it till an opportune time for Mercy for Animals. And we really wanted to stress in our messaging that any time abuse is found on a farm, it should be reported immediately and not recorded and held till when it's opportunistic for the activist group. This was also an opportunity for us to reiterate that the programs in the industry that we have are working and highlight the FARM program, which National Milk runs, and how when abuse happens on the farm, there are guidelines that take place, including a third-party audit and some continuous improvement things. So this also gave us a chance to show customers and consumers that the programs the industry have in place are working. So we got the text message Saturday night. Tuesday, we released the video. This was the page that we put up on dfamilk.com. It explained what happened. It linked out to a statement that the farm gave, and it also played video when you went to our site. On Thursday, we learned that Mercy for Animals was going to still do their press conference in Denver. And we had already pushed out this site to local media in Colorado as well as trade press. But we felt like, great, if you're going to do a press conference, this farm's already been through the third-party audit. We have some continuous improvement steps identified. We'll also issue a press release that kind of gives an update of what has happened since we put this video out on Tuesday. So here was our press release we put out. Again, this was another opportunity for us really to admonish the extremist attacks that Mercy for Animals uses. And with it, we started a hashtag report not record. We received pretty positive response from the industry about how we proactively approached this video. It was, again, a new way for the industry to do it, and we couldn't have done it if we did not have the support of all the industry organizations backing and all aligned in how we were going to approach this. On social media, we saw use of the hashtag report not record strongly used not only by dairy farmers, but also industry and industry associations and trade publications. In the end, what we saw with being proactive with this video is that we really mitigated the conversations that were happening in on mainstream media and with consumers. On social media, really the conversation was just back and forth between activists and the industry. We saw mainstream consumers really not engaging. And through traditional media, we saw very little about this story. And I think that is because we came out, we owned it, we talked about it, we owned up to the mistakes that had happened and talked about how we were going to continuously improve. Looking back, we still have a lot of work to do. This was one step in a proactive approach that needs to continue to happen within the dairy industry against animal activists, and we continue to have the conversations about how can we continue to be proactive. Great, this strategy worked. How can we continue to stay ahead? And then the also thing that we have to look at is there's stuff that needs to be done in the industry. If we're going to go out and be proactive and talk about transparency, then we really have to look inward at the industry and make sure what we're doing is correct.
My daughter was in 8th grade last year, and she came home and she says, "Dad, we're reading this book in school." And she showed me the book, and I started reading it, and I go, "Oh my gosh." And so come to find out, it's a Common Core curriculum in New York State, and it's mandatory that they have to use this book to learn about persuasive writing. But they're not just using it for persuasive writing. They've got English teachers teaching about agriculture, and you know how well that probably goes over. I can't let things sit like that, and so I called the teacher up, and she said that they wouldn't have time for me to come in because of the curriculum or to do anything. So I said, "Well, I'll go to the principal," you know. And so I went to the principal, and he kind of said the same thing. So I said, "Well," I ended up meeting with the superintendent, and I had a whole package ready of what I wanted to do, or kind of what I wanted to do. And he offered he was going to let me come in for 2 days and teach school, which he's probably regretting right now. So, being that I'm not a teacher or a public speaker, as you can see, I tried to get some help. So I went to all these various groups, and I was told everything from "That's not our directive, that's not our job," to "We're a lobbying group, we're not an educational group." And it's kind of frustrating. I mean, I was really frustrated. But I didn't stop. And finally, our local cooperative extension had just hired this young lady in the front here, Bernadette Harwood. And so on her first day, she got to meet me. And she helped me with this program that I put together, and especially because technology is not my thing, so she actually helped me put this together too. So first thing we did, we created a survey and gave it to the kids because we want to know what their thoughts were. And so you can see some of the stuff we asked them about and their concerns: food safety, GMO, animal welfare. These are some of the questions they had, or quotes, I guess. I mean, do you ever stop and think that you kill animals for a living? And so all these here that you can read, we addressed all these. And I talked about that, you know, that it's a fact of life and that kind of thing. The takeaway home things from the book, you know, that our food is not safe, and it's not good for you, that the cows live in their own waste. These are the stuff from the survey that the kids said. The animals obtained are not sustainable, or suitable rather, conditions, and we drowned most of our foods are drowned in chemicals. So that's pretty disturbing. So we created a lesson, and we went in for 2 days and taught school, and we did a lot of things on sustainability, because that's what they talk about in the book, which I don't agree with the definition of sustainability. So we asked the kids, what they thought sustainability was, because it's a big buzzword. I mean, that's all you hear about is sustainability. So we talked about, being that I'm a dairy farmer, that's to my heart. We talked about the difference in milk production just in the last 20 years, and we talked about it even previous, That's what I call sustainability. That we're making 9.5 gallons today on a dairy where 20 years ago we were making 7 gallons. And so then we watched this BASF video, and that's, they talk about sustainability and feeding this growing planet. We went into animal welfare and talked about nutrition, bedding, and fans and lights and all the stuff we do. We also talked about, I think I have this slide. We also talked about the LD values of chemicals and how much chemicals we use on an acre of field, and explained. I measured up the classroom, and told them the percentage of an acre that was. I don't know that I would do that again, and we talked about Red Bull. I actually brought in chemical to school, and I showed them how much chemical we would use. So I did a lot of site things that they could see. And then, the LD values, then that Red Bull is actually more toxic, and, because all the kids drink 2 or 3 Red Bulls a day. And that's more toxic than Roundup or glyphosate. The other thing we talked about is the income. So I got 2 volunteer kids to come up, and I asked them what they wanted to do for a living. And I said, well, you're going to make $500, and you're going to make $500. So I took Monopoly money, and I gave it to them. And then I says, okay, you're going to live in the U.S., and you're going to live in Egypt. And I explained, so then I took a certain amount of money away for where they lived. And I said, now where do you want to live? Where we have cheap food? Or do you want to live, sustainable like Egypt? So, we talked, Andrew talked earlier about social media. I still have a flip phone, so I don't do much social media. But there is some farms, local farms, and so the kids could ask questions, I mean, every kid has a phone, and they know how to operate it way better than I ever know. So the second part of this, we did a farm tour, and pretty big into school tours, always have been, but it's mostly younger kids. This was a pretty neat opportunity that I got 8th grade kids at the farm, because at least they understand things a little bit more, and you can explain things. So I thought, I have a tour wagon, and I usually take the kids and do the whole tour myself, but I thought this time I'm going to do it a little different. So we got in specialists that I work with on a daily, weekly basis, and to go over each area that they work with. I had a dairy nutritionist, my artificial inseminator, a veterinarian, and they talked about each of their roles on the dairy and what we do there. We also talked about animal welfare and milk safety, which I had a helper that's in the audience here that helped me with that. We did careers in agriculture. So we had the FFA kids come and BOCES and talk about different careers in agriculture. And one of the other ones we had was a crop consultant, and I couldn't believe how much input that got. They thought, getting rid of manure, we just did it however. And so that was pretty neat, our CAFO and crop consultant. And Precision Ag, a local equipment dealer, has a cab set up with all the GPS stuff they bring on a trailer, and the kids really like that, And then I also had an agronomist from Monsanto talking about GMO stuff. So on the feedback stuff, I guess one of the first days we went in and taught school, I had an autistic kid come in, and we were standing up front, me and Bernadette, and we were waiting for all the kids to come in after the bell rang. And he says, "What are you doing here?" And I says, "Well, I'm going to talk about the book." "Oh, that industrial agriculture." And oh boy, it's bad. And I knew this kid, his family, both his parents are doctors in our community. And I says, "Well, all right, Jackson, sit down for a minute, and at the end, then you tell me what you think." So we went through our spiel, and so I asked him. I says, "Jackson, now what do you think?" "I've got a lot to think about now, but at the beginning, it was totally bad. What he calls industrial agriculture, according to the book." Teacher feedback, when we went in, and that was probably part of our problem getting into the classroom. The head of the English department, which was one of the teachers, Mrs. Wolf, she said that she only eats organic because her husband is the chemistry teacher. And I thought, oh, okay. So I knew we had a hard sell. Except for when she eats ice cream, that apparently you don't have to have organic ice cream, because I've seen her eating ice cream. But I think, she never told me personally, but some of the feedback I got from the other teachers, she's changed some of her thoughts anyways. I mean, the other teachers, none of them had any ag background. The closest ag background that they had was one of them worked at a grocery store during college. Even today, my daughter says a lot of the kids will come up and say, "Man, we're really happy with what your dad did, and it was fun going to the farm." And 8th graders are pretty awkward. They don't ask a lot of questions because they're afraid that their peers are going to pick on them for asking a question. So you really didn't know how to take it. But to hear that, my daughter telling those stories now, and then all the speakers that helped me at the farm tour, I mean, I had every one of them has said they would come back and help us this year when we do it again. So, and then so my take-home things is, I guess, don't be afraid to speak up and be persistent. And then, I think some of this money that we spend in promotion, the American Dairy Association, all these commodity promotions that we put money into, I think they need to be in more educating people. Especially with what I was saying about at the beginning, that one of the groups said they were a lobbying group, not an education group. If we don't educate these young people, they're going to be the consumers, and we're in big trouble if they're brainwashing these kids at a young age.
I'd love to have been a fly on the wall in that barn that day. I just can envision the kind of questions and things that 8th graders had. So 3 great examples, some good action please items hopefully, but let's get some questions for the panel here with the time we have remaining in this session. So raise your hand and one of the Aggies will bring the microphone to you, and then you can ask your question from the microphone, or if you've written it down on an index card, hold your index card up and they will bring it up to the front. So start on my right.
Hi, Michael Stebbins. I'm with CBI, and we do GMO answers. But previously I had worked with the Foundation for Biomedical Research, which basically promoted animal research. And we found a lot of people, parents and teachers would contact us saying that PETA was going into the schools and actually making presentations. But are you guys finding that PETA and HSUS are going into the schools, but yet finding barriers being put up when you want to go into the schools to make the counter presentation?
I'm not aware of that, but I mean, I think most of the teachers probably belong to PETA. And so I think they're being taught that in school anyhow.
Don't tweet that, by the way. We don't need to blow up the Twitter feed.
But I mean, I did get some resistance, and when I finally, like I said, went to the top, that I was welcomed. And another thing, especially in New York State, and it may be different in other states, but budget has always been a problem for field trips. So I was really surprised when he said, we will do a field trip to, I mean, it's only, 6 miles to the farm, but I mean, we will do a field trip as many times as you'll let us come to the farm. So I was pretty happy to hear that right from the superintendent. So.
They're going into a lot of urban schools. Rural schools like where we are isn't really an issue, but in like Rochester, Buffalo, they're getting into those schools because we're in Western New York. So, and they're not going under the guise of hey, we're PETA. They're going under the guise of let's talk about animals. Let's talk about the worm studies.
Okay.
So yeah, it's kind of scary. They've not been where we are yet, thank God.
Other questions for our panelists?
Joe, my question kind of piggybacks on that. Have you gone back? Like, have you gone to 8th grade every year now and retaught the same thing?
So this was last year. So believe it or not, I'm getting flack again. I contacted the teacher. Well, Bernadette emailed the teacher. I contacted the principal, and so I guess I got to go see the superintendent again. He's told me it will be an every year deal, but you know. So we got lots of younger kids coming to the farm, but that's a little different, right? They just want to see the cows and feed the calves and that kind of thing. So this was a totally different deal for me than what I usually do.
Let's see, we've got your question.
This is for Kristen. Did the Mercy for Animals video actually show something that you would consider abuse, or was it normal?
Yeah, so that's a great question, because I know in some they would show normal farm actions, but it was not abuse. In this one, it actually did show some abuse in the milking parlor. There was some, I think it was a screwdriver, I think is what we finally figured out it was, pushing into the milk udder. And that's actually how the Goodharts had seen it. They had monitoring cameras in their parlor, and on regular monitoring, they saw 2 employees doing this, and as soon as they saw them, they were terminated. So once we saw the video, they had already addressed it about a month earlier.
My question's also for Kristen. As far as the subject of people videoing and then holding that video until an opportune time to edit it and release it, have you heard of any states who have successfully passed any legislation that would require a person to report it within a certain amount of time or anything like that?
I'm not aware of that. I do know that there was some legislation out there in Iowa and maybe in North Carolina, but I am not aware of what the outcome of those were.
And maybe the follow-up question would be, you know, what would be accomplished by attempting to legislate something along those lines? You know, that's maybe the crux of the debate too.
Right.
You're not going to jump on that hand grenade.
No, I'm just
That's okay.
Yep.
Sometimes as a moderator, you just throw a grenade out there and see who's going to jump on it.
Yeah, I'm not going to take
Maybe
that
they
one,
won't.
but thank you for offering it.
Clayton.
Joe, Andy, everybody on the panel, maybe the whole room. Is there an alternative besides or in addition to Michael Pollan's Omnivore's Dilemma? Is there something on the other side that the English class might have used, a book that they might have used?
So we gave them a whole list of books that would work for that. And like I said, what I was told is they were using it for persuasive writing techniques, which apparently works really well with 8th graders.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, that was going to be my question, was why the English class was the one that was
right,
tackling.
and that's why they're using it, and
Yeah.
that was what I was told, and that's what the state Common Core says. That's why they're using it, but I think we all know that that's not the only reason they're using it.
Interesting.
Just to say, it would be good to have that list, that bibliography in our back pocket. I'd like to know those books.
Okay, we can get that for you.
Okay, great. Pass the mic there behind. We got one.
Or was it, was the abuse, and why would they do it?
Yeah, so we honestly think that this woman who came on the farm encouraged the abuse. And so through their monitoring cameras, we've had several investigators looking at, can we charge this woman to see if she actually incited the abuse and tried to get it. It was so, in talking to the farmers, it was so horrific when they found this on their monitoring systems that they did not know what was going on because it was just not the practices they had taught on their farms. So once we sat and talked with the family, we thought maybe we should look in and see if she was inciting some of it to happen. And so that investigation is still continuing. It was like really garbled audio, so just really staticky, just basically video.
Gavin, I've got a question for you. So you in your presentation kind of outlined a little different strategy, if you will, for engaging with the press and with the public sort of at the same time. So as you've identified some of those media outlets, you mentioned the Tribune, I think, where they've consistently reported sort of on the wrong side of an issue or whatnot. Have you seen any cases where the approach you've taken has yielded a different attitude from an outlet, or you've seen an improvement in obviously you've seen an improvement in the overall coverage from a total volume standpoint?
I wouldn't say that we've changed attitudes, but we have changed the way they produce stories. There are certain outlets that have television producers who have called me and said, we are working on a fisheries story, we are working on a story about seafood, and I have been told that I cannot produce this without calling you all. So yeah, we certainly changed the way they produce the stories. I'm not, they're not calling to hug me or anything.
Right. Yeah. We'll call that a win, right? I have to call you. Can I take you out for lunch or something? We're not going to talk about fish, but that's good. Yeah. That's good. Outstanding. Well, let's give these panelists we're going to do one. We're going to do one last question in the back.
So, Gavin, just a quick question for you. It was really fascinating listening how you all have dealt with mercury in seafood and fisheries. And from a hardcore science and health standpoint, it seems like you all really sort of had a huge win on that. I'm just curious if you've had similar sort of wins that you can talk about, whether it's from a management standpoint, from fisheries, or maybe genetics, or something that's maybe, or even environmental, something that's not necessarily just focused on health, and how you tackle that.
Sure. We are the only, we're the last animal protein on the planet that you hunt down and bring to the plate. That this is it. And so sustainability of wild-caught seafood primarily is a huge issue for us, and in the press it's a huge issue. We've been dealing with that similarly to the way that we've dealt with mercury. I mean, there is science, and each species, we deal with many species. There's more than 1,000 different fish on the FDA fish list just for names. And in each of those, generally speaking, has its own sustainability story. So our effort has been to sort of break those fish down into their own sustainability stories, as opposed to being just lumped. Greenpeace or an Oceana will just say all fisheries are bad, all wild caught fish is bad. But when we're able to segment the story and segment the narrative into each individual one, that really has been successful in changing how the press reports about it.
We'll do, I guess, the last question for each of you, and sort of a lightning round, sort of quick response was, if you were going to give one action item, each of the three, one action please item that you were going to leave us with, what would you suggest? Gavin, start with you.
So there's an old saying, and that is that you never pick a fight with a man who buys ink by the barrel. Yeah. Right? And that nobody buys ink anymore. Okay? So everything is digital, everything is online, and that is the great equalizer in our ability to push back on, certainly in the press, on erroneous stories. So there is no need to be afraid of the press the way we used to be. It was probably 5 years ago that Newsweek was sold for $1, and the whole company, not just the magazine, was sold for $1. So just be aware that the media landscape has changed tremendously in the last 10 to 5 years, and we can take advantage of that.
Okay.
Mine is, as an ag industry, we have to stop being so nice. I think we just sit back and take the punches. And I think it's time for everyone to look at what the activists are doing and see how we can use their tactics against them.
Mm-hmm. Joe, you gave us some good ones earlier already. But.
Yep. I would just say be persistent, and we have to educate these kids because this is the next generation of our consumers. And
for sure. Another round of applause for an outstanding panel.